Thanks for showing up today. So welcome to the Building Connections with Media and Culture webinar. It is the last webinar in a series where we've been discussing the role of media in combination with teaching practices, and it's to motivate, inspire, and facilitate student learning. This webinar is going to provide tips and strategies for you to apply with your learners, engaging them with culture, media, and much more. It's for educators, people in the field of education, and for anybody interested in the topic. Hi, this is Pamela. I really appreciate you joining me here today. And as a little bonus, as we've been doing through this series, we're going to give you a free booklet to research skills. Oh, sorry, that was last week. We're going to give you a little booklet on media and culture. If you would like a copy, please stick around until the very end and we'll tell you how you can get your copy. Also, please don't worry about trying to take extensive notes. We'll show you how to get a copy of the slides at the end of today's workshop. And before we get started, everybody will be on mute mode. There is a chat feature for posting your questions and comments. There'll be a question and answer time. Please post your questions in the chat as they come up for you, and we will answer them at the end. Let's all go to the chat. Let us know from where you are joining us. See, you already have been doing this because you knew that was coming. We have people who are joining us here from what I see from Bloomfield, New Mexico. One of our teachers is from the Teachers Transform from Hobbs, New Mexico. Socorro. Oh, this is great. From where are you joining us? We have Taos and Albuquerque. We have lots of teachers from our Teachers Transform. Hey, Scott. Let's see. We have Raton and Las Cruces and Bernalillo, North Carolina. Wow, we are from all over the place today. I am so excited that you are here. I'm actually wondering, we have Des Moines and Albuquerque as people are still just coming in. We have local places like Miranda Canyon, and we have people from schools and from their schools in Taos, and this is great. So I'm also wondering, we're going to do a little poll to gauge how you are doing today. So the poll is going to ask you, how is everybody doing? And you're going to answer either delighted, hungry, grateful, blah, just to gauge where you are. We can gauge our audience. Pretty soon here, we're going to close this poll. At this moment, it looks like, oh, this is great. More people, most people are grateful at this moment. And second to that is delighted, although the hungry button is going up to 10%. We have 0% blah, which is great. So I'm about to close the poll, and thanks so much for joining. This is always a fun thing to do. All right, I'm going to end the poll. We have 50%, 54% grateful. Oh, and it just, I don't know what the other percentages were because as you saw them, they just kept changing and now it just stopped. So I'm just going to advance the slide and go to the next section. Thanks for joining with the poll. So today, what are we doing today? Today we'll be exploring the use of media and culture to help build connections in the classroom. By the time this webinar has ended, you'll have a big picture of media's role in education and our lives. We'll delve into techniques for cultural connections in conjunction with media literacy for student engagement in a digital and therefore networked world. Plus, you'll have some actionable ideas to put into practice with your students. Media Savvy Citizens, who is presenting this webinar today, is a New Mexico-based entity facilitating understanding, positive participation, and meaningful media interaction for New Mexico learners. We focus on enhancing media literacy and media fluency initiatives. We consult, design, and implement coaching, workshops, courses, and capacity building trainings for adults and students on site and virtually. Our work and research is focused in New Mexico, but we do and can work outside of the state. Right now, we're supporting educators transition to digital classrooms. At this moment, actually, they're about to be closing their classrooms. As you know, May is when school ends, and we have had a very interesting time with doing a pilot project with our Teachers Transform program. We launched this media fluency professional development program called the Teachers Transform program this year. We were working with about 30 districts across the state, enhancing media literacy with training and coaching for our unique geographic, cultural, and technical needs of New Mexico. We were really looking at rural versus non-rural, high-tech versus low-tech, and what has happened today. This specific year has given us a lot of insight into how to best serve our communities. Some of these teachers are joining us today, and we have a special guest from the program who will share her learning. Welcome, everybody. So teachers have had the opportunity to meet weekly as one component of the program. As this program comes to a close, we hear participants say at one of our last meetings, how this program was preparing preparing her for what was going to happen in the future. And of course, we started back in January. And so, yeah. And so that was, looking back, was, I felt like, well, I think the teachers were feeling like, wow, okay, now we know what, why we're doing this. None of us could have imagined experiencing the rawest reason for becoming media fluent and to facilitate that in our students. So, in their students as well, right? So the teachers rolled up the sleeves and took charge, and we at Media Savvy Citizens witnessed and supported them in their process into remote and continuous learning. So as things shifted for everybody in education, our approach and content shifted as well. And so we designed for our audience, listening to their needs the same way in which teachers all across the world were doing that for their students. These webinars are part of their learning. My name is Pamela Pereira, founder of Media Savvy Citizens. Over the past 20 or so years, I've worked with at least 10,000 students and teachers across New Mexico with media literacy initiatives with various learning institutions. I have a bachelor's in communication and a master's in media studies with a focus in media and learning. My background in communications and design and production, media studies, media literacy, plus working in schools informs the direction and focus in building media fluency and new media literacy skills for all learners. Joining us today is Amory Martinez. We have been lucky to work with him this year. He's part of the MSC team, and he works for Santa Fe Public Schools wearing various hats. Amory, why don't you introduce yourself? Welcome, and then you could lead us into the webinar.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you very much for having me today, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amory Martinez. I am the Santa Fe Public Schools Innovation and Education Coordinator. So my role is, as Pamela said, I do multiple things. One of them is to manage and maintain and run and build our what's called our computer science ready initiative for 2025, which means that every school site grades K to 12 at Santa Fe Public Schools will have a strand of computer science that is integrated into their Common Core. And essentially, it doesn't mean that every kid needs to learn how to code or become computer programmers, but it's more to broaden the base of STEAM and computer science and how it's transforming the platform in which kids are learning today and for future careers. So we're really trying to become more cutting edge and innovative in our approach into teaching and learning. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm hopeful that I can help you guys in any way that I can in answering questions today. So with that being said, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know or in the chat. The first thing we want to talk about is defining culture. And as you can see, defining culture basically is just a set of customs or beliefs and essentially actions that are acquired through communication or imitation. And this graphic that you're looking at here really shows a perfect example of the elements of culture, right? Because culture is central. It's influenced by multiple factors: language, social habits. You know, what kind of habits do we normally do? Do we go to church every weekend? Do we go to school every single day? Things of that nature. Religion. How does religion play a role in how we even use education and how we view education? Food. How is food impactful? The environments in which we come from and the environments we live in, the different cultures that we get food from are also influential and an element of culture. Entertainment. Entertainment is another factor because right now entertainment impacts culture. I think we can all agree that the fact that we can't go to a basketball game or perhaps go to a movie or feel comfortable about going outside and watching our kids play soccer or whatever it may be is also impacted. And so it's also an element of culture. And let's go to the arts. Now we look at the arts, we recognize how the arts are so impactful and how they're also impacted by changes in the norms that we're used to. And that is that the elements of culture impacts arts and vice versa, arts impacts the elements of culture because without the arts, it doesn't lend to creativity, and it makes it really difficult for the development and the advancement within education and in careers. And so that's a very important element. So there was also a couple of other factors that I just wanted to discuss and or mention in this one slide. You know, customs, arts. Let's just summarize: customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people or other social groups, their understanding that's learned by a socialization. All of these factors are all basically tied to the elements of culture. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the next slide. So we just want to talk a little bit about discovering cultural connections. And when I talk about cultural connections, I'm talking about basically what is it that we relate to in each of us. For example, my connection to culture, and I'm just gonna break it down a little bit here, why connect culture to a classroom. But first of all, I'm originally from New Mexico, in a small town called Chimayo, which is just north of here. And culturally, it's rich in many ways. It's basically, it has a very long-lasting, rich tradition that goes back generations. It's definitely what's considered more of an impoverished community, but it's rich in its culture because of its history, both in the positive side and in the negative side of its history. So some of those factors are very influential in how kids learn. Because let's take Santa Fe, for example. Santa Fe Public Schools has many resources at its disposal where every student gets their own device from grades 7 to 12, gets to take their own Chromebook home. And as long as they have access to the internet, if not, we provide them a hotspot to get access to the internet so that we can also increase that range. But culturally, that might work in 30 miles north of Chimayo, but in Chimayo it doesn't because one, it's a rural community. Two, it doesn't have the funding that Santa Fe might have. It doesn't have the political structure. It has a number of factors that basically impact it in some ways. Now, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means that it takes time for us to get past that hurdle. So just a couple of bullet points. Why do we connect culture to the classroom? It strengthens the teachers' and students' relationships in building a community within that classroom. They learn about perspectives. They get to see that one perspective was, I talked about how, although I'm 30 minutes away growing up, you could see the disparity and the differences, although there were equal amounts of understanding amongst the cultures themselves between Santa Fe and like Chimayo. You reach linguistically and culturally diverse learners. This is true. I grew up with parents who were mostly Spanish speaking first and foremost, and then I grew up speaking both English and Spanish. And so it gave me a diverse opportunity to learn with other learners when I went to school. Now, embracing that and with technology and the fact that we're so much more integrated with multiple cultures, it basically allows us to become culturally rich and become diverse learners because now we get to learn from our peers And we get to use tools such as technology to expand the platform to learn from our peers as well, and our teachers. We want to promote empathy and reduce prejudice. So we basically want to, as we've always said, we want to level the playing field. We want to be socially justifiable. We want to say we're socially responsible. But at the end of the day, we want to try to focus on the most important factor, which is promoting empathy and reducing the prejudice of what learning is really about. Accelerating student understanding of concepts and skills. What I mean, technology is a tool rather than just another device for them to get them an answer. So it's really the responsibility of us to teach them how to use concepts and skills. And last but not least, reinforce community and collaboration outside of the classroom. So what we mean by this is every day that we work with our teachers, we're collaborating at Santa Fe Public Schools and or the community. And this is a perfect example. The fact that we had to mobilize quickly and transition and get devices out to students and also communicate with parents about these students and how to help them, whether it was just very basic technological skills or it was even just packets, work packets. It didn't matter what kind of tool we were using, but it was more about the resources and the content that the students were getting. So there's one thing I want to move on to. It's called being seen and learning. And in being seen and learning, what we learn about is about literacy, close reading, language, geography, metaphors, and symbols. And in 1993, there was a Kentucky poet by the name of George Ella Lyon started working on this powerful poetry. And it can be applied in creative writing, in social studies, history, and poetry. And it's called free. And I think, Pamela, what was that called again? It was called, you worked on something called phreology.
Phreology, yes.
That's right. And Pamela actually did a really nice poem. Would you mind kind of sharing that a little bit? The Hello, I Am From.
Okay, so yeah, actually there are like different templates that you can use out there. And
Right.
So I'll read mine, and it gets, just gives you a feeling of a little bit of who I am. I am from a printing press, from adobe bricks and broken glass shards to keep intruders out. I am from fresh-baked ordinal bread and outhouses in the night. I am from melting snow, whose caress softens the soul. I'm from honking horns and sideways worn bowler hats. I'm from Villa Zapata. I'm from using a fork with your pizza and taking care of the elderly. I'm from do-it-yourselfers. I'm from nuns as teachers, from salteñas and tripas, from El Adrián composing famous cuecas, and from grandma making play airplanes out of wood planks and rope. Switchback, foggy cliff roads of thin air catch my breath up the hill.
That is really awesome. Thank you, Pamela. That is really great. So this is one of many templates that you can use, correct, from this website, and so it's accessible. And will we be able to provide the individuals that are attending today with that information, Pamela?
Well, actually here at the bottom it says phreology.com, so you can just go to Phreology and look for the I Am From poem and get it there, because I didn't link it here on the slide, so sorry about that.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, phreology.com. Thank you so much. Just one other thing. So I want to move on to discovering cultural connections. And there's a few bits of information in terms of like that I think is useful for you. Here's a list to get a more responsive classroom. Note that multimedia literacy, it changes the semantics of the word, media literacy, and that using multimedia literacy, it has a different effect even though it means the same thing. Empathy, right? Empathy, a practice social emotional awareness to understand the student's point of view. Multimedia literacy, you use various media examples, perhaps film, photographs, or some form of new media. And so you're showing connecting experiences for the students. It gives the students an opportunity to be creative in their own media and let them find a media that they can actually use effectively. For example, in my case, Before I became an educator and I became an innovation coordinator, I practiced as an architect for about 8 years. And that was what my degree was in architecture. And one of the tools I worked on a lot was 3D design tools, even though I was doing a lot of hand drawing and stuff. But they allowed me to really visualize and realize the importance of how these multimedia types of tools are useful. So consider that when you're thinking about those things. Diverse authors include diverse voices, perhaps, to engage the learners. You can plan for a shared heritage point of view, make it like a culturally relevant event. Pop culture. With pop culture, you can bridge the home and the school by including the pop culture to make it an experience that's relevant. And somehow it connects the content by incorporating popular events, or perhaps it's popular music or videos or games. Something that will motivate the students and makes it relevant and that they can connect to. Because the whole point of education is that life is education. In my point of view, that no matter what, the education does not stop when they get to 12th grade. And even if they don't go to college, they will go on at some level in some career or something, and they will continue to gain knowledge and experience. And essentially, the way we look at this is that we're building the foundations of skills that are necessary for them to then advance themselves in the education of life, or life's education. And then last but not least, cooperative exercises. Perhaps the students can collaborate in a structured environment to solve some problems, whether we can be in a virtual world or not. Now that we have platforms available to us, this will change the dynamics of how kids will learn and use media savvy tools. So, Pamela, do you want to talk a little bit about engaging with media and culture?
Yeah, thanks. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just want to heads up just to tell people that if you're having a hard time hearing, you may need to come right back in, take the link right back in. And I don't know from which end, I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm going to move on with the presentation and you can, see how it is. So in this section, we're going to explore media in a networked world. And so I first want to define a few terms for you. Last week, I defined these, so it might be a little bit of a repeat, but if you're new to us, just want to define that media is any form of digital or non-digital communication through a medium, anything that is not face-to-face, right? Media literacy, as defined by the National Association for Media Literacy Education, is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication, including digital and non-digital. In new media literacy, new media, when you hear the word new media, that's native to computers and computations, right? So new media literacy is part of media literacy. Media literacy is this big umbrella that has a lot of literacies underneath it, including information literacy and tech literacy and digital citizenship. It's like it's because it's encompassing all forms of communication, and so it's really being to understand that. But new media literacy involves, like I said earlier, digital technologies. So in this webinar, we are using interactive polls and chats, and we're coming together as adults in a culture of learning. Right? New media is part of living in a networked society where social media and interactivity connect us to one another. So with that in mind, what does it mean to be media fluent? So we know that these new technologies are pushing us to develop different literacies, new ways of understanding the world, new ways of interacting with our world. And fluency is the goal, like the end product of being media literate. It's like a language. You're fluent. You read and you write and understand and can read between the lines, right? So this slide is show how media is applied in learning. It synthesizes how media is used to analyze and for culture and to connect and for discovery, for research, and to participate in society. I'm wondering whether you implement media fluency activities to support concepts. So I'm going to go on with the next slide, but go ahead and do the poll at this moment, just because I'm curious to know how you whether you're implementing some of this stuff. 100% says sometimes. Okay, well, there we go. How do students engage with media and culture? Okay, we are often and sometimes. So it sounds like about half of you, 40%, 41% are often, 50-something% are sometimes. So some people are hardly doing it. Anyway, that's one of the reasons why we're doing. I'm going to end the poll now. So great. Okay, 62 sometimes, 33 often, 4% hardly. Thank you. These are some examples of what students do, right? From small kids all the way to high school and beyond. This is what they do outside of school. It's a broad brushstroke of, how they consume and produce media. And so this is the world of a lot of our students. And so educators have a big task, right? That they are, in many ways, competing for students' attention with the world that engaging students is really, at this point, requires a lot of connecting of things and the planning and delivery of those plans. So this is just a visual that shows all those connections, how content connects to teaching practices, that connects to fluency and to culture. And when we're researching different people on the internet, we're connecting with a global community and global ideas. And we engage people with student interests in creating also a classroom community. So all these things are happening, and there are a lot more connections than these. Those are just a few. This is on our website. There was we have a white paper that we wrote that it was specific to how new media literacy transforms schools. And as you can see, back 10 years ago, the Department of Education had their technology plan, and they were talking about using critical thinking and multimedia in connecting disciplines, right? Connecting different content areas. And more so now, 10 years later, as we've become even more data-driven, networked, and global, all of these ideas apply in interlinking different concepts. So at this point, what we're going to do is look at some examples for making connections for elementary, middle, and high school. It's just a few little tips and tools for activities. So this is actually, we're talking about pop culture, right? And how do we connect these pop culture with cultural stories? Where we are exploring different theme-based learning. If you have the theme of superheroes, you can then maybe have a discussion about what's a superhero and who's a superhero. Maybe do role play with that. Who's a superhero in your community, right? And bringing that into learning, and also literacy, right? Like you're reading something. Sometimes when you're looking at comics, sometimes the eye gets dropped. So there could be a lesson here on, the differences between proper language and improper language, and, starting decoding those things, because we're starting to do that. And I think it's important to make those connections where every language has its own set of, every platform has its own set of rules, right? In Twitter, people communicate differently than they do on Facebook, than they do via text, than if you were sending an email out. So anyway, so this is a link to the Super Action Comic Maker. And this is where this image was made. And the superhero here is saying, I can't wait to go home and can't wait to make some fry bread when I'm done with this. So we don't know the story. And it would be built ideally, right, by a student who's creating a story around that. I'm curious to know what's happening with this story. I'm already engaged here. So today we have a lovely person. We have Maria Sheldon, who is a teacher participating in our program, in the Teachers Transform program. She teaches at Santa Fe Public Schools, and we are fortunate to work with her. She's going to talk a little bit about what she's doing with her students. Welcome, Maria. So if you can turn your microphone on.
We have it here.
Yes, I hear you.
Thank you so much, Pamela. This is a wonderful experience. So I just wanted to introduce a little bit about my students. The majority of my students are from immigrant families who come here, mainly from Central America and Northern Mexico. These descriptors kind of help us understand that sometimes please understand that they have two languages before coming to the States, trying to assimilate in the United States. When I start the lesson that you see here on the screen, I usually have to have a peer discussion, a peer knowledge discussion into what they believe it's a hero or an idol. And based on their ideas, we're going to find out, what are the attributes that they think a hero and an idol have. When we do the analysis, we usually use complete sentences. And this helps me out, bring a discussion into what they have, if they can name two hero or idols, in order to have an answer on why do they consider them so. When I have discussions with my students, I like to keep tabs into why they think, that very specific heroes or idols, how they can have changed the world for a better place. What is their legacy? So some of the answers that they have, it's something like, they will say something like this. I believe that Messi is, a hero because he's strong and he's consistently played well every single season. Or Cesar Chavez, the boxer, right? That was another answer. Not the historical figure here, but the boxer because he's intelligent. He signed a long-term contract. Another one of my students suggested that Shakira, the dancer, was a very good example of a hero because she was angry as a young girl and because she basically overcame all her worries, right, by singing. She was dedicated. So I usually keep the descriptors that my students come up with. And together we have the definition of who is an agent of change. So when I introduce the lesson, why is Susan B. Anthony an agent of change? As you can see, I show the picture of the dollar coin. And I ask my students, we just look at that currency and we said, who's in the coin and what's the value and what's in the back of the coin? Why do you think Susan B. Anthony was chosen to have her image? Why do women have the right to vote? And why did we regain that right to do so? All these questions bring us together to a very, just a short reading assessment. I like to always have, a literacy, a reading assignment. And from there, we go into a video. So as you can see, once I have the adjectives well defined for them, we go into a short video that helps us understand the life of this woman. Usually my students have a Google quiz form, right, after we watch a video, and their final task relates to creating a Google slide with a representation of a hero who is a newcomer. Whom do you consider to be an agent of change in our society? So I love it when we have a common platform where all my students, right, from different backgrounds can come up with a common solution, a level field, as we mentioned before, and they create new platforms to communicate, right? So we want to have more and more agents of change in this society, and I believe that my students will be able to participate in this beautiful task. So, if I would like to close the session, I could certainly use that phreology, right? Where we study specific heroes, the heroes that they mentioned. But I love having this new technology as a tool because I think, as Emery mentioned at the very beginning, it levels the field for every student, right? Now we don't have to say you have access to or not. Everybody can participate in a equalitarian way, if you will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. I am actually going to, if people are still having problems, I'm going to reboot it. You're really not going to notice, but there may be like a lag, in a few second lag. So here I go. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, this is really quite interesting, this platform here, when that happens. So it's interesting because now I have to advance the slides all the way to where we were. And so the next section that we were going to be discussing was the high school section. So I just want to thank you, Maria, for presenting and letting us know the work that you did with your students. That was really amazing and a really good way to bring, connecting culture to content in the classroom and making their learning more relevant. So thanks for that. So this slide is, this picture is actually interesting. This is from West Las Vegas Middle School, from Brenda's classroom, who presented to us a few weeks back during the digital citizenship webinar. And as you notice, that student work is posted on a reading graffiti wall. So I just wanted to bring that up again, bringing culture in, but graffiti culture, right? And so, and just kind of co-opting in a way the idea of graffiti and graffiti for learning. So I thought that was really fun. So for high school activity, to first understand the original content and what all those elements are, and read deeper into the content to then flip it into something new. That's one of the reasons why synthesizing information is also really important, is because it's a certain brain function that happens that gets awakened to create a deeper understanding of content. I can attest for that because I do both those things myself. And so take for instance, a Shakespeare play and you turn it into a hip hop song, or whatever the culture is of your students, or something that you think your students would enjoy. The favorite poem here is linked at the bottom. Because it promotes reading and it shows diversity by having different people recite poems that they love. And maybe it might spark some ideas for you to incorporate in your classroom. So, okay, well, that wraps up our activities. Amory, do you want to do a recap of what we did today?
Sure thing. Thank you, Pamela. Yes. So let's just give this some closure. These are all the things that we covered today. One, we established definitions, right? We established definitions of culture and the media and its impact on media and media literacy, forms of new media literacy, and also how you synthesize media fluency behaviors in your sort of daily practices, if you will. We discussed students' interactions with daily media culture, right? Like how it's impacted, whether, again, we talked about food, music, entertainment, things of that nature. We provided tips and strategies for educators so that they could feel like they're engaging with their learners, and that they feel like their learners are connecting to culture, and that both are integrated, so that makes the learning experience relevant. And of course, activities. We've provided some activities, some examples of those activities in which perhaps you could implement at some point, at some level, either elementary or perhaps in middle or high school. So hopefully some of these discoveries and these tips were useful and beneficial to you, and we really appreciate your time. I'm very thankful for being here. Pamela, thank you so much. And I hope to have another opportunity to do something like this again. But thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, what we're going to do next is we're going to share some files, and we will go into the Q&A after this. And so what we have going on, there is a PDF of today's presentation, and there is also a digital booklet. If you're joining us via computer, it should be underneath the chat. If you're joining us, I'm not sure, the different devices do different things and it will come up in different ways. So I'm not sure what's happening if you're joining us via a phone or a tablet, but it might come up underneath the chat as well. So while you are downloading those files and getting those, just want to let you know that we are also going to be putting out a survey. We'd like your feedback about what you valued, how it went, what else you'd like to hear webinars on from Media Savvy Citizens. Your name will be entered into a drawing for some Media Savvy Citizens swag. And we'll give this out at the end of the series. So we'll do this today since the series is over, and we'll be contacting the winner tomorrow. But if you're joining by phone, don't take the survey because you'll get bumped off. And so when we do the Q&A, you can take the survey at the same time in a new link. And otherwise, if you're joining us by phone, if you would take the survey afterward, that would be great. We'd really appreciate it. You can access previous webinar information through our website. If you'd like to continue working and learning together, we do offer professional development services to fit your specific needs. So you can talk to your administration as they plan next year's professional developments for you. You can stay in touch via our website and social media channels, which are linked in the icons on this page. And now following is a question and answer session. I just want to, here as we go into our question and answer session on culture, I want to thank everybody for joining us today and thank Amory and Maria for sharing. We would like to know if you have any questions here. This webinar concludes our free webinar series for you all. The series was made possible by the New Mexico Legislature, the New Mexico Public Education Department, the University of New Mexico, and Media Savvy Citizens. We hope that you got a lot out of these webinars. And if you can thank the sponsors, please let them know that you value the work that we are doing if you value it. Somebody wanted to know, are there any updates on what the beginning of the school year may look like here in New Mexico? And I wish I had that answer for you. But I don't have that answer for you. I'm not quite sure what it looks like. And I think it's just a matter of going through and they have to gauge what's happening with the health of New Mexico in order to make the right decisions as far as how to move forward. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. Does anybody have any questions, any comments about the webinar that what we presented today? Just to remind you, the webinar is on building connections with media and culture. So if you have any questions or comments about today's webinar, you go ahead and post that at this moment. Looks like a lot of people were having a hard time with the connection. I'm not really sure if that's, how we rebooted it and we asked you to leave and come back, but I'm not quite sure. if I apologize for that if that was an issue for you. I'm not quite sure how to have troubleshooted it other than what we did. And I think that that is definitely something that we encounter and will be encountering more of as we move forward with media and technology, right? And digital media and teaching remotely. If that is what is going to happen in the fall for New Mexico or outside of New Mexico, that we have to continually, have a plan B and a plan C. If our technology isn't working, what do we do? And so it really is requiring a whole new level of patience from everybody, right? From learners, and patience from teachers, and having the forethought to think about like, well, what's going to happen if our if our technology is not working, or things like that. And so I know that you can relate, because a lot of people have been experimenting this year with trying new things, and we've been forced to do that, right? And so if anybody, keeping things grounded in real life really makes a big difference in our classes, says one of our participants. That is true. So somebody says my questions may have been answered before. So I'm really glad that we were able to answer some of your questions. Somebody wants a quick summary of the elementary example. I lost my connection at this point. Yes, well, the elementary example, and you will have a chance to access that, the PDF and so what we talked about was maybe incorporating, obviously always knowing who your audience is, who your students are, and what their culture is, and what all the different cultures, where they come from, and so you can best connect with them. And so what we were discussing the idea of connecting popular media and cultural stories. So exploring theme-based learning, such as superheroes, or ranching culture, or Pueblo clowns, or whatever culture, is specific to the students that you are serving. And then maybe doing some role play. One of the examples that we gave was a link to a tool called the Super Action Comic Maker. And that is just a fun tool where students can make comics, but they're not just making comics of any random superhero. The idea would be, if you want to link it not just to media culture, but to the culture near them, where they come from, you can do, in this example, it was from a person and you don't know if they're male or female, and they were dressed in some funny outfit in a city, and the person was saying, "Can't wait to make some fry bread when I'm done with that." And so, and so it was just something silly, but it's just an example of what, how, you can connect culture to popular culture, and then to the classroom. And then if you were going to do a lesson with language, or deconstructing a language of a platform, or you're doing a reading lesson, you're doing reading and writing, maybe you've read a graphic novel, and so now your students are using that idea of graphic novels, or creating a little strip, a comic strip, so they can do that. This was just only one section, right? So it was only one, what do you call those things? A frame, a comic frame. So if anybody is interested in posting any more questions, will we be able to keep any of the files on Canvas? So many great files. Yeah, well, this is our Teachers Transform program. We have been learning through the platform Canvas as our learning management system. And the answer is yes. And we will be discussing that in our wrap-up meetings, celebration of learning meetings next week. So yes, you will be able to access some of that information. Now, if you would like to access to these webinars, we have posted them, the videos on our Media Savvy Citizens YouTube channel. You can also access some of our booklets. We're posting different things in our website, mediasavvycitizens.com. If now that we are coming to a close, I want to thank everybody again for participating, for being so patient with us, and for joining us today and through the webinar series. There are some people who have actually attended each and every one of these webinars, so you're amazing. So this webinar concludes the series. We will close this webinar, but we will stay online so you can keep downloading the files if you need to. If you need a certificate of attendance or copies of the PDF and or the digital booklet, go to our website's contact page and request a copy. And please stay in touch and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, and be well, everybody. Thank you, Amory, again for joining us, and thank you, Maria, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Be well and be safe. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you. All right, so I am now closing the webinar. Thanks. Be well, everybody.